This video is sponsored by World Anvil. Welcome to Critical Role Demystified. I'm Mike Christensen, and this is the series where we break down the lessons we can learn from episodes of Critical Role. Today we're breaking down episode 18 of the Vox Machina campaign, Trial of the Take. Also, you might be able to hear a bit of creaking wood in the background. It's extremely windy, and our gate is not in awesome condition, the gate to the backyard, so if you hear that, that's what it is. Also, happy Thanksgiving! At the very beginning of this episode, Matt announces that they've tweaked the mechanics to Percy's gunslinger and pulled back on some of the Tiberius/Sorcerer house rules. They were using a house rule where one sorcerer point matched one level of the spell cast, but that was getting pretty intense with these higher level spells. He does also clarify that they're keeping a house rule. He mentions it in the context for the sorcerer, but it will be true for all spellcasters for pretty much the rest of Campaign 1, where you can cast 2 spells per round as long as one of them is not higher than 2nd level. In the rules as written, if you cast a level 1 through 9 spell as a bonus action, you can only cast a cantrip with your action, and vice versa if you happen to cast one of the only bonus action cantrips. But in the Vox Machina campaign, they ruled that you can cast a level 1 through 9 spell with your action or bonus action, and use the other action to cast up to a level 2 spell, but no higher. It's okay if that didn't make any sense to you. Really, the only people it affected were Tiberius, Scanlan, and Keyleth. As Matt says, this is the process of being a dungeon master. You try things out and you tweak them as needed with constant communication with your players. I imagine the sorcerer change was especially necessary right now, not only because the party is just reaching higher levels, but because the party balance was changing for this arc thanks to the group being split up. But again, this is the kind of thing that I say all the time, and I think it's a really important approach to D&D. The rules don't matter as much as finding the approach that works best for your table. And while it might be tempting to decide on a unilateral system, it's also important to reach an equilibrium with your players and find out what makes all of them as happy as possible. More than anything else, it's just really important to have open, honest communication with your players, especially when you feel that something isn't working the way it should for the game to be both fair and fun. Anyway, let's get into the episode. This session and the following session both focus on Percy, Scanlan, Vex, and Grog getting their assignments from the Slayer's Take. As the episode opens, Vex takes an early morning shot of alcohol with her brother because they are both distraught at not being on the same team together. At the Slayer's Take Guild Hall, they meet their other team members. The first is a tiefling with silver hair and a moonstone at the end of her staff. This is Zahra Hydrus, a cool and somewhat glamorous tiefling warlock. She's played by Mary Elizabeth McGlynn. The second, played by Felicia Day, is a bumbling, accident-prone human wizard named Lyra, who is technically already a member of the Monster Hunting Guild and appointed as the leader of this team. She also has a romantic fixation with Aldor, the leader of the Hydra Hunt from the last episode. It is not reciprocated. They receive a few healing potions and a bag of holding that is specially designed to preserve monster body parts they harvest, which is quickly nicknamed the Bag of Colding. It's meant to be a loner, but I can tell you now, spoiler alert, the Slayer's Take never, ever gets this bag back from Vex. They receive their contract, which is an actual physical piece of paper Taliesin reads aloud. That's one of my favorite tricks with handouts, especially when you're dealing with contracts in character. Their target? One adult white dragon. The contract requests that they bring back the heart, tongue, eyes, 6 claws, and 20 teeth. They magically sign the contract and become bound to it. The contract does not include the location of the creature, nor does the Huntmaster know it, because that's part of the challenge. These people have to find it themselves, and they have just 3 days to do so. Thankfully, Vex has the ability to detect whether there are dragons within 6 miles, but there's nothing draconic in that radius. They ask around in town and find a man named Dagon who claims he saw a white dragon in the wilderness, despite the fact that everybody treats him like somebody who saw a UFO. He also says that it seems like there is a blizzard originating from wherever the dragon is, so the party needs to find that blizzard and search inside of it for the dragon. The blizzard is 2 days away, and the contract must be completed in 3 days, but fortunately, it's a magical contract. The moment they kill the creature, the contract will be considered completed. So as long as they do that within the 3-day window, they're in the clear. They rent some horses for the journey, which they're able to do at half price, thanks to Zahra casting a suggestion spell. But Lyra, who's trying to be more assertive as the leader, is very cross with her for doing so, at least without consulting her first, as the leader. Lyra's great. I love Lyra. And then they visit Lyra's uncle Randy, or rather his warehouse. He's the trade ambassador from Amon, so they go there and get some heavy winter gear. Vex and Zahra snipe at each other throughout the first day, but as they keep watch together, they begin to bond over their terrible parental experiences. Vex's mother was killed by a dragon, although she doesn't know what kind of dragon it was, and her father is alive. And a jerk. That's not the word she uses. Zahra's father was both murdered and a jerk, again, not the word they use. He was a dark wizard who kept her in a cage. Once he was murdered, she was free to make her own way in the world. Zahra is apparently a warlock of the moon. She draws her power from the moon and carries a moonstone at the end of her staff. Interestingly, we only hear references to the moon. When she looks up at the sky, Matt never mentions that there is a second small red moon. Probably because that just wasn't a detail he'd come up with yet. Although it is possible he did know there were two moons, and it just slipped his mind during the game. That can happen when you're DMing, especially when you are running a complex session where there's an in-game time limit for the monster to be slain, and a real-world time limit before you lose two of your players and have to switch to the other group. But wouldn't it be nice to have all of that information in one convenient location, so it's easier not just to call up that information when you need it, but to have it somewhere where it won't be out of sight, out of mind? Well, you can make sure these sorts of important world-building details don't get forgotten during the game by using today's sponsor, World Anvil. World Anvil is an online resource that doesn't just make it easier to keep track of your notes, but it actively makes world building more enjoyable. I've started building a new campaign setting. I'm still in the very early stages, but I'm transitioning from using Microsoft Word or Google Docs into using World Anvil, and that has been really helpful. It's even easier to use because I don't have to copy-paste links to other Google Docs pages to connect items or try to brute force my notes into a format that is easy to read and parse. All of that is handled by using World Anvil. Their auto-linker feature makes it really easy to connect relevant pages, and their formatting helps present your information in a really user-friendly way. If you visit worldanvil.com and use the promo code SUPERGEEK, you can save 40% off of any annual subscription payment. Thank you so much to World Anvil for sponsoring this video. During the final watch of the night, Grog hears something in the forest and comes face to face with a wolf with bone spikes sticking out of it, a dire wolf, along with a pair of orcs and an ogre-orc hybrid, which is what the monster manual calls an orog. And it's initiative, so here are some highlights. Percy gets to use his new rules for the first time, and he feels like a total badass, especially when he rolls 2 natural 20s in a row. In this moment, he feels so awesome, he describes his character as almost manic. He's firing while wearing his pajamas, the kind with the butt flap, and the butt flap is down. Of course, a few moments later, he's reminded that this description of his pajamas means that he has a much lower armor class, and some attacks that might have missed him actually now hit him. Now, this is something Matt doesn't worry about for anybody else in the party, and I think that's kind of interesting. He hardly ever worries about what the players are wearing when they wake up from being asleep, even during an encounter. I don't think this is true anymore, but at the time, if the party was woken in the middle of the night, there's a lot of characters who are still considered fully armored. According to the rules, you can't sleep in your armor. Only Lyra and Grog would have been fighting ready, because barbarians don't need to wear armor to get the full benefits of their armor class, and wizards can't wear armor at all. But this is a moment where Matt is doing something he does really well. He's honoring the player's choice. Now, in this case, he's kind of using it against Percy, but how could he not? It's so rare that we even talk about what kind of armor Percy is wearing at all. But when he opens the door to the subject like this, you kind of can't ignore that fact. Unless these pajamas are made out of mithril, his armor class would have dropped significantly. But it's funny that, for all other intents and purposes, this just wasn't really a rule Matt cared about that much. I am curious to see when that tune changes during the game. Will it be when he's dealing with someone more heavily armored, like Pike? I know that Matt had a lot of strong opinions about how her armor should work. I've talked about those before in the 4th episode of this series. But it's also possible he'll enforce this sooner than that, maybe because folks on Twitter reminded him of how the rules actually work. And that's fine, he has a much larger audience than just his players, but if this rule isn't important to you, and you don't enforce it at the table for most of your players, unless they obviously open the door to it, like Taliesin did during this description of his butt flap, then that's fine, it's not a big deal. These players all still had a great time. You don't need to get every rule right to run a great session of D&D. Now back to the recap and the other relevant details of the fight. Scanlan dominates an orc to protect Grog, but then Percy kills the orc by rolling another natural 20. And don't worry, we are seeing the rising of one side of the critical seesaw. In a few weeks we'll see the low end, when Will Wheaton joins the table. Grog keeps one of the attackers alive to interrogate them, and thankfully Zahra speaks orc. This prisoner says that they have intruded into the orcs' territory, and it's just going to be a matter of time before the other orcs find them. He says that the party will be eaten, and at first I thought, oh wow, these orcs eat people? And, well, maybe. But they also did have a huge direwolf with them, so that also might have been what they meant. Zahra says that they are just passing through the woods and trying to find something that has nothing to do with the orcs. And thanks to an extremely high persuasion roll, the orc reluctantly agrees to offer them a bit of guidance. After all, the dragon is also picking off anybody who doesn't properly hide in the forest, and that includes orcs. The dragon makes its lair at the top of the highest mountain in the forest, and he gives them a general direction. Once he's said everything he's going to say, Grog chops his head off. Again, Lyra is very cross with him for doing so, at least without consulting her as the leader. I love Lyra. They continue to travel the next day, and here we learn that the other party has the flying carpet. Grog says that he gave it to them before they all left on this dragon mission. That's going to be important in a few episodes, so just keep that in mind. We also learn that Lyra and Aldor have had, as she calls it, intercourse, after she bought him some armor worth 10,000 gold. I hope those two crazy kids make it work. The party comes upon a blizzard that is not moving. It stays in place regardless of how the wind blows. Vex is able to use her primeval awareness and detect a dragon. And then they all hear the roar, and the weather gets worse. Just with this dragon's very presence, the weather is affected. They can barely see the dragon in the air before it vanishes further into the storm, but they do get a glimpse of it. This is something I love about the way dragons and some other monsters are described in the Monster Manual, and I know that gnolls and demons get a similar treatment in Volo's Guide to Monsters and Mordenkainen's Tome of Foes. These creatures have a strong impact on their environment. You don't have to push things too hard to demonstrate that these monsters are actually impacting and sometimes corrupting the natural world. Also, as a nice bonus, this dragon flyby causes a hailstorm, and that does a little bit of damage to the party, so now they're not going to be at their max health when they reach their next encounter. Thankfully, Vex is able to guide the group through the forest. They see a glowing entity through the trees and push on and ignore it. And I legit have no idea what that was. I mean, probably it was a will-o'-the-wisp, that's a pretty solid guess, but we never see it, so I can't say that for sure. But I actually really like that a lot. This forest is full of lots of stuff, not just the orcs and the dragon, and a few other things we'll see in a moment. There's lots of dangers around here. The party comes to the base of a high mountain, and there is a cave going into the side at ground level. And then a huge boulder rushes at them from the forest and clocks Vex for 30 points of bludgeoning damage. And a pair of frost giants emerge, one from the forest and the other from the cave. And they are about to kill these intruders called the Vox Machina. But we'll come back to that in 2 weeks. Thank you so much for watching. Like I said, we'll be back in 2 weeks for the awesome conclusion to this 2-part story with Trial of the Take Part 2. It's a great episode. You really should watch it and then come back and watch my video about it. If you want to support the channel, there are a few ways you can do that. You can subscribe and ring the bell to get notified about new videos as soon as they come out. I post new videos every Monday and Thursday. You can support me on Patreon. Even giving $1 a month really helps this channel, and every new patron gets me closer to unlocking some of my goals, including upgrading my equipment and taking this series weekly, something I would love to do. You can join my Discord. There are a bunch of people catching up on Critical Role. Each campaign, at any given time, people are watching new episodes for the first time. It's a lot of fun. And you can sign up for my newsletter to get updates about what I've got going on. Until next time, play fair and have fun.